in the room can ask questions. The first question had to do with what's happening, or the criteria, or your opinion on what's happening in Spain, Marina. This is a question for you in terms of the district heating and cooling. And I've also got another question for you, another specific question for you, Marina. It says the Paris-Éclair project, I guess it's a public project, right? Is it possible to develop them privately? Are there any incentives to develop them privately? And another question for both of you. It's a question for both Marina and Raymond. In the case of Marina, he says, I think I understood that in France, the subsoil infrastructure energies in France are not considered renewables. They are not? Yes, they are considered renewable. Oh, then it was my mistake, obviously. Okay, so they are recognized as renewables. In any case, the question is for both of you, both for Denmark and in France or in other territories. Is there any regulation on how to use residual or waste energies coming from the subsoil? I guess in the case of Marina, that's for France. In the case of Raymond, that is the use of waste energies as subsoil energies for Raymond in Denmark. Well, thank you very much for the questions. I'm going to start with the last ones, which are easier to answer. The Paris-Éclair project is a public initiative, but it was developed in a PPP framework. So the private element is also important. There is a private operator in this case that lived during the design, construction and operation. There was a first partner for 7 years, and now we are assessing different bids for this next period between 2023 and 2028. So there's a private partner. And then we also have private partners from the developers side, from the urban side, which is my company. We are a privately owned company for engineering and legal support. So that's another type of partnership where we strengthen the competition of that public authority. But the initiative, it's public. The initiative itself was public. I hope that's clear. With regard to the regulation, in France, there is no regulation enforcing us to use waste heat. What we do have is a support system that promotes it, but there is no obligation. It's only incentives to use that waste energy. And the first question, which was maybe a bit more difficult to answer, is my view on the situation of the district heating and cooling in Spain. Well, I've been living abroad for 11 years. I've never worked in Spain. Obviously, I'm interested in Spain, and I've worked mostly on energy transition, and I look with a lot of interest to what's happening in Spain, but maybe my view is not totally fair, we could say. The European studies did allow me to come and talk to ADAC and to different developers, to talk to city councils like the one in Barcelona. So I also know other private developers such as Revit. And the view that I have is based on those interactions and what I read on the press and what I follow in specialized sites and the conversations that I had professionally or personally with former colleagues. So it's biased. What I can see is that district heating and cooling, these systems are the great unknown in Spain. I think there's very little awareness, both from the politicians and from the society, obviously, because there are none of these grids. If I am in Soria and I know that people talk about the grid or the system in Soria, then I'll know about it. The mom, the grandma, the daughter, they'll all know about it. But these are very one-off situations. And so it's not something that's well known. We don't know how a heating grid works. I even remember that when I went to the university, I had a district, I had about a specific subject on heating and cooling, and we never spoke about district heating and cooling. So there's a lot of lack of knowledge. For instance, I was surprised that when the politicians approved the climate law, they focused only on electricity renewables. They don't talk about the end energy. They don't talk about geothermal energy. Obviously, part of it, when we talk about renewable energies, I'm sure that part of it will come from electricity renewables, obviously, but we can only focus on electricity. We have to talk about end energy, final energy. What else can I say? I think there's a lack of visibility in these European studies. We had to contact the Spanish Association of Heating Systems and ALAC, and they do like a census. And luckily we have that census, otherwise there'll be zero visibility on the type of systems we have. But if we compare it to other censuses in other countries, it's not so detailed. We're not able to carry out an in-depth analysis or as much in-depth analysis as we did in other countries because of that lack of information. So we need more resources to understand our market, because if we do not understand the advantages of this system and the market, the heating and cooling market, we will not be able to do adapted policies or adapted projects. Also, when you live abroad, you see what other countries are doing and you think, well, why are we not doing it? You know, there's nothing like living abroad to see what others are doing and seeing if we can adapt. For instance, I'm surprised when I see new buildings created with heating systems, with individual gas boilers. Well, you're mortgaging the people there to continue consuming fossil energies that we do not actually have in this country. If you have a building with individual boilers, gas individual boilers, it's very difficult. You know, district heating is incompatible. It's more complicated technically. So if we know what the climate targets are and technical solutions exist for district heating and cooling using local resources, why are we doing it? Why are we not imposing it as an obligation in the construction legislation or in urban planning? Why are we building new districts without obliging that? Because we could have district heating using local renewable and waste energies. And I think also the faculties need to have more information. Maybe things have changed since I graduated, but I think architects, engineers, we need to know how district heating works. And the real estate developers, we should also have advantages for them. So because the substations take less space, for instance, in the hotels, you can use the rooftop instead of using the air conditioning. Having the air conditioning machinery there, you could use the rooftop for economic activities in Barcelona. That was one of the main commercial arguments, so that the hotels would participate on this district heating. So there's a lack of awareness, support also in terms of policies, direct and indirect financial subsidies, so that the investments are made and so that we can support this at all levels, national, regionally, or locally, with private entities too. What's positive? I think there are some positive issues, as I've seen in the study cases. There are some projects, there are some cities and some private developers that have been bold and have looked abroad and have decided to carry out these projects. And I think those are great practices. And for instance, I know the Mieres and Barcelona projects and the Revit projects in Castilla y León and Castilla-La Mancha. And I think there's also the Subterra initiative, which I think is really interesting. And when we look at the best practices in Europe, I think there's a lot of potential. We just need to raise awareness. We need to communicate. We need to talk about the advantages and why it makes sense to support this type of networks. I also think it's interesting that a big electricity company in Spain should be interested in district heating, because that would mean, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, that would mean that there is also a synergy potential between the thermal and electricity systems. And I think that that moves us forward in order to have more integrated energy services where we can simultaneously bring together all types of consumption and where we can do all the necessary synergies in order to make the most of the resources that we have to face the climate change challenge. So that's all. That's what I wanted to say.
Yep. Business modeling. Business and legislation. The legislation in Denmark, as I told, is non-profit when you're doing district heating. District cooling is for free. Everybody can do that. Everybody can make money. We try to. We don't know yet. But in the district heating is an older legislation, and it's from a time where it's a very strict that you cannot make profit out of district heating. So you're welcome to invest your money, but you cannot get your money out of it with interest. So also, if the electricity production, if you have a power plant, you do power and you have heat, you have to have a separate calculation, separate business case for your heat production, so that so that money from the heat production does not run into producing the power side. So there's a very strict wall between the electricity production and the heat production. Everybody can do it, but there's not that many that wants to do it, except for the municipalities. And the legislation also is a very strict that I don't, when I run separate companies, due to the monopoly situation, when you have pipes into people's houses and they cannot pick another supplier, there's a very strict regulation that I don't mix the money between the different brands that I run. So in this way, could we have other business models with the private investors? Actually, a big company, actually the Maersk, who is drilling oil, has very big experiences in drilling, are going into the field of geothermal heat with the very big wells. They're very good at that, and they're now going into this business. And I'm very sure that they do that to make money. So I don't know how the business model will come out in this case, but in the other hand, it is nice if we can use the energy from the center of the earth to do our heating. And I'm happy that somebody takes the chance to actually try to develop a business model for this. But so I think we are changing a little in how we look upon all this. But the district cooling is new. It's new legislation. They have not made any legislation yet. So there's a free market, which also means that somebody else could come into my city and put up a district cooling equipment next to mine. But I think the big challenge in this situation is that if we want to use the waste heat from district cooling production, it has to run into the district heating system. So again, if a competitor to mine expect that he can sell the heat into my system, it makes it more difficult for me to run my system, because I get dependent on a third part who also expect to get access to our system. But if this is the best way to use the heat, I think we also should do the best of ourselves to get to be able to adapt the heat, because we need to use all that heat that is there.
Tenemos a disposición, a ver, ahora sí se me escucha.
Okay, perfect. So we have a microphone in the room. If anyone would like to ask a question, I see there's a question there. Meanwhile, if my event colleagues help me, maybe we could watch a video before, or well, we could see this slide. The flag there is from the science faculty, the science school of the university, the central university. The central university, I think I've seen on the internet that it was in force between mid of the 19th century till the midst of the 20th century. Then it became Universidad de Madrid and then Universidad Complutense. So those who are in streaming, it would be great if they could see that jewel that we have there. I would like you to focus on that. Also, the people here in the room, because it's always great to have this type of possibilities. Now we'll move on to the question. Well, thank you very much. I'm Javier. I'm a member, an honorable member of Madrid Subterra. When I heard Marina Galindo talk about the project in Paris, and now that I heard her complain, and I think she's right, that we have to give more visibility to district heating. Rather than a question, I wanted to make a small comment, given that we are here at the Complutense University within Ciudad Universitaria, our campus. I'm not sure if Marina is aware that the Ciudad Universitaria campus was created in '84 with a philosophy very similar to Paris-Éclair, and that we still have the district heating that was created and that supplies the heating to many of the buildings of our campus. We have district heating since 1934, and now the university is looking into how we can update our district heating system, and we at Subterra want to participate in that effort. Given that you spoke about visibility, I just wanted to make that visible, because I'm sure that 99.9% of the students, and many of the faculty don't know about it, and don't know that the heating coming from the radiators comes from a heat plant that was designed in 1934, I think he said. I'm really sorry, there's a bit of echo on the line. I didn't know that.
¿Alguna otra pregunta?
Okay. Any other intervention? Any other question? Yeah, there's a question there. Hello, good morning. I have two questions. One is to do with heat storage systems from summer to winter that was mentioned by Raymond. I would like to know how important are they? If that's just a project, or actually you guys are using it? And economically speaking, whether it's something that is feasible or if the numbers work, And as for Marina, in Spain, I agree with what you said. I think we have to reconsider how we want our cities to be in the year 2050, and how we want these heating and cooling networks to work in the future. I think that is very important, that how we can make these networks work in neighborhoods that are already there. It's true that in new developments, it's clear that we can integrate these networks. I think the challenge is how we're going to do it in 90% of the networks that have already been built. So how do we integrate these heating and cooling networks or systems in Chambéry, which is an old neighborhood, and what experiences are there in Europe in doing something similar, considering that maybe in Spain the density of population is higher?
Start. Storage from summer to winter, we don't do it not yet. I know that the airport is having a system that they have made it, but I think they're struggling with it. So it's not working completely yet. I know we have places with the big holes in the ground which work, but they can only keep the water hot for like a few months. So it's nothing that can push the water from summer to winter. I don't remember if there's any of the deep hole storage that's working in Denmark, but I have heard about it from other countries, so I think they should work. And I know that our big supplier of heat is very interested that we actually save our heat because they can use it in their program. So no, not yet from my side. If I can jump to the old housing, Copenhagen, in the 80s, Copenhagen made it mandatory that everybody changed to district heating within 9 years. And that also included very old buildings in Copenhagen. So I would say it's easy. But of course, a lot of things also depend on how you have your internal radiator systems. Is it a central heating system? Then it will be easy. You take out a lot of things and you stick in a little thing. In that way, it is simple. One of our developing this, I told you that in Denmark we have to expand the district heating in a rush. And in our neighbor city, there's a little part of the city, 500 houses, very cozy, very small, very dense, completely saved, protected housing with a brick stone on the ground and so on, and a very high capacity people. And I'm not sure who will dare to dig up everything and stick things into the houses, but it has to be done, and it can be done. So.
Y sobre la pregunta de cómo se
With regards to the question of how to develop networks in already built up areas and how to interconnect existing buildings, at the end of the day, to develop this kind of project, you need to conduct a feasibility analysis. And to do that, you need to understand how, at a district level or within a number of districts, what are the characteristics of your buildings. We need buildings that are compatible with a heating network, so they should have central heating, whether that's powered by gas or fuel. Once you understand what is the potential demand, then you need to seek what are the potential supply sources, what are the power sources that can be used, whether you have geothermal, whether you have recovery energies. For some of these sources, you also need space. So in a densely populated area, you have the challenge of building a new plant, a new geothermal plant, for example. And then based on that, it's all a matter of developing the business model that you think best works. So I think the first step is to have a clear vision of what are the buildings that could be interconnected, that could be compatible. In that sense, the Danish have been doing this since the 80s. They do an analysis of what are the type of buildings that they have and what is the optimal power source that would apply to those buildings. In the past, they did that between fuel and gas and heating sources to make sure that they would manage limited resources. And this is what I call energy planning at a district level. So that's what we need first need to do to understand what is the potential that we have. And then if buildings are not compatible with the heating system, maybe we need to implement a different solution.